the start, it was more than an hour ago, but we set out to work on what we called the 411, right? So it was 4 questions. Why do we make disciples? Who do we reach? What do we say? And when are we going to do it? It's on one piece of paper, and it took us a little more than an hour. Now, if you take up Cody on this goal, you have somebody that you want to train. If it's just you and 1 or 2 other people, it will really take you like at max an hour. Part of what took us longer is just the setting we're in, right? But you can definitely sit down across the table from somebody and train this tool in less than an hour. So how many lost people were just in Kewanee? Almost 10,000. We know that we want more than just the people here to be equipped to share their faith. We want to equip more people, which is why we want to challenge you to do that. But that's just to wrap up. Again, the 411 is just a simple tool. What I want to then switch to, and this is a huge part for me, so I've kind of gotten some of that, but then the question is, if I open my mouth, and we've even heard some of this as we've been role-playing, oh, what if they say that? How am I going to respond to like this? I'm not going to know what to say, right? So we're going to give you some responses you might get when you try to engage, even just engage somebody, or even we pray for the opportunity to share the gospel. So let me reset the board, but this is just a simple tool called 4 responses to the gospel. Just 4 of them, right? I remember in my home church, there was a book about evangelism that it was like this thick. And I was like, if that's what it takes to share my faith, I definitely can't do it, right? So as you heard, as Cody shared at the beginning, we're looking for biblical, definitely rooted in the Bible, but simple and reproducible. So this is just, of course, there's not only 4 literal responses, but most responses are going to fit into 4 categories. And we see some of them in Acts 17, 32 to 34. So would somebody want to open up their Bibles and read that? Be warned, there's a few hard to pronounce names, but you can just make up what you think the pronunciation is, and we'll go along with you. So Acts 17, 32 to 34. Okay, so really simply, what are some of the responses? Paul talked about the whole previous chapter is his address, or half of it, to people in Athens about Jesus. He says, this guy's like Jesus came back to life. That's where they hear this about the resurrection of the dead. And how do they respond to the gospel? What are the responses that you heard there? They sneered. That's a bad one. What else? Yep, sneered, contempt. Those are all kind of that same idea. There were people that were interested. They weren't like believers, but they were like, hey, we want to hear a little bit more. And then what's the third one? Some people believed, right? And it even lists their names, right? So just really simply, we use a stoplight illustration. You're going to have to pretend these are the right colors, right? When we try to even start a spiritual conversation, and eventually when we share the gospel, there's actually 3 main responses we could get that we see illustrated in this passage. The first one we heard, this is their response on this side. And over here, we're going to put our response. But what was it? There was sneering. There was contempt, right? That's a no. And a lot of times, quite honestly, the no's are not like that. I mean, every once in a while, you have a literal door slammed in your face or an actual conversational door closed. But most of the time, honestly, the worst you get is like, I'm really good. I don't really pray. And they don't want to talk anymore, right? Like, we're fearful of worse. And we never know what God's going to have for us, but most of the time it's actually not that hard to get a no. The other response, though, was like, we'll hear more about this, right? So today that might sound like maybe. And that was a little bit, as we role played, I think a lot of the answers kind of fell into that category. People were interested in the conversation, but they had some more questions, right? Maybe. But then there were in Acts, what did we read? There were some that joined Paul and believed. So that's yes. And again, this is a yes, not just to, this was a great conversation, but somebody's like, yes, nothing is stopping me from believing in Jesus. I want to follow him, right? That's the yes that we're praying for. That's what we want to see. So the question is, what should our response be? Because we're going to run into those, right? We're going to run into those. So as we run into somebody that says no, maybe they just say no to the even attempt at a conversation. Maybe you share the whole gospel. Like I said, I've had people that say, I'm in brokenness and I'm good. What should we do? Well, we want to pray and move on, which sounds maybe harsh, and I'll clarify part of that, but What did Danny read in Colossians 4? We have to pray that God would open their heart. If they're really in a no place, they're a red light, do we think that we can argue them? We can come up with some clever thing that's going to convince them? No, God's got to be the one to move their heart. So we want to pray for them. There could be times where you literally move on just because it's somebody you met and you're never going to see them again. For our friends and family, of course, neighbors, we're going to continue to pray for them. We're going to be seeking, we're waiting for God to open up the door again. But there is a moving on and like, you know what? I've done what God called me to do, and I'm going to wait for him to reopen that door. Does that make sense? We still love and care for people well, but we can move on from that. I got to go share again. No, you shared, and you want to continue to live like Christ in front of them and continue to pray for them, right? So that's a red light response. Now, if it's a yellow light, like we were kind of hearing, somebody's like, oh, I don't know about those miracles. That was one response we got. I can't remember what you said in your role play. Oh, yeah. You were more of a red light? I don't know.
I want to hear more.
Okay. So it's basically an invitation. I like to write the word discover, for them to discover more about who Jesus is, right? So for John, it might have sounded like, you know what? That's great. Would you ever want to read a story from the Bible about some of those miracles? Just read it together and talk about it, right? So I invited him to discover more. Maybe even you can do it right then. It just depends on the conversation and how it's going. But it might be, the next time we get together, or let's get lunch together and we can talk about that. But you invite to discover more. So that's what we would do with the yellow light. Somebody that has some spiritual interest, we want to invite them to discover. And then a green light, somebody says yes to Jesus, right? Not if they just say yes, this was a fun conversation, that might be more of a yellow light, but really yes to Jesus. I'm gonna write that down. Well, what's our job? Thinking back to that 4 fields illustration, we want to disciple them, right? It'd be like if there was a brand new baby, you wouldn't, no parent would just be like, okay, they're good, right? No, if you're the one who helped them respond to Jesus, you would be the one to care for them. You're going to disciple them. Part of that discipleship is going to be church, and we're thankful for good churches like this, but we never want to be like, here, pastor, I brought you this baby, right? No, you get to disciple, and if you need help, you get to ask your pastor how you can do that, but you get to be the one to disciple them and help them follow. And then there's one more response. You're like, where's the 4th one? Paul didn't have it because he was as frontier missions work as you can get. But we're going to run into this probably even today. We'll run into this in our lives. There's going to be existing believers, right? People that have already chosen to follow Jesus. What should you do with them? We could just high five and move on. But if there's 10,000 lost people in this town, I think we would say, hey, has anyone ever trained you how to share your faith? And if you've got some time, I'd love to sit down and teach you a simple tool. It takes about an hour to go through some simple ways to engage people and share your faith with them, right? So we want to try to offer to train to get more people equipped to be able to share. So those are they maybe seem simplistic, but I have found in basically any spiritual conversation I have, the responses fall into one of those, right? And my invitation is to, it's either, man, thanks for letting me share, or sorry to interrupt your day. You just kind of move on. This has been great. Would you ever be interested in reading a story from the Bible together to see if it would answer some more of your questions? Wow, this is an amazing decision you just made. I would love to help you follow Jesus. You could tell him we call that discipleship, but I would love to help you do that. When can we meet so I can help start that? And again, I already said that. Could I train you how to share your faith with others? So those are the 4 responses. As Danny talked about, if you're wondering we kind of gave you the 411 for training. If you're wondering what these could look like, there's just some simple tools called, for Discover, we call a Discovery Bible Study, a DBS for short. Danny would love to train you in how to do that. How do you lead a simple Discovery Bible Study with somebody that's not a believer yet? And then there's a discipleship series called The Commands of Christ that Danny could also take you through. So that would be a place to sign up to kind of get some more of this training. This is where we start to get out of fields 1 and 2 and into field 3 that we didn't have time for today. Let's go ahead and turn to your training buddy. And again, where this is just reps to get in our head. Tell your training buddy what are the 4 responses you could get when you start a spiritual conversation. Pretty simple, right? Red light, a no. A yellow light, a maybe. Green light, a yes. Somebody who's already a believer. And what do you do in response to those? So just kind of to get that extra repetition, turn to your training buddy and share those.